There we are. It seems so long since I spoke about Suella Braverman. She's just had a legal defeat mere days after she was regaling the Oxford Union with her thoughts on immigration, multiculturalism, and what she perceives as Britain's existential crisis. In her prime, the Oxford Union hosted distinguished politicians. In my prime, frankly, when I was there, the Oxford Union was the mecca for top top front bench politicians, certainly from the government and sometimes from the opposition. Today, it seems to have pivoted to failed politicians with questionable policies and an enthusiasm for rhetorical provocation over serious hard work. What are they doing? If they want to hear about Suella Braverman, fund her to write her autobiography or get somebody to ghost it for her. But inviting her to speak, what has she got to talk about? I really don't think she's got much to say. The High Court's judgments against Braverman, and by extension the Home Office, marks yet another ignominious entry into the ledger of her failed political career. The case revolved around the accommodation of asylum seekers at the former RAF base at Wethersfield, a site that has been described in court and by advocates as akin to a detention facility rather than a temporary refuge. And the court found that the Home Office, under Braverman, had acted unlawfully, failing to consider the specific needs of vulnerable individuals, including victims of torture and modern slavery, as required under the Equality Act. In the words of Mr. Justice Mould, this was a most serious and inexplicable omission. The ruling underscores a fundamental flaw in Braverman's approach to immigration policy, a prioritisation of deterrence over humanity, optics over legality. And this is a politician who, when speaking in the Oxford Union, framed deporting asylum seekers to Rwanda as a personal ambition rather than a legally or practicable or practically viable policy. Yet, in her time at the Home Office, the policies she championed, often with a bravado disconnected from operational reality, have repeatedly failed under scrutiny. The Wethersfield ruling joins a long list of defeats for the former government's approach to asylum, including multiple legal challenges to the Rwanda deportation scheme. The implications of this ruling are significant. First, it calls into question the viability of large-scale asylum accommodation sites that prioritise cost-cutting and containment over dignity and care. And Wethersfield was conceived as a solution to the growing use of hotels, yet the reality of the conditions, poor mental health support, rising suicide attempts, racial tensions and violence, has demonstrated the fundamental failure of the strategy. Second, it places Yvette Cooper in an uncomfortable position. She has now inherited this legal debacle. And the judgment doesn't force the government to close Wethersfield, doesn't just force the government to close Wethersfield, but it does leave it in clear breach of law. And the question is now whether Labour will persist with this policy or chart a different course. Cooper has thus far signalled a tougher stance on immigration than many expected from Labour, but this ruling presents an opportunity or a test of her willingness to depart from the Conservative government's mistakes. Of course, now that they've got so many people who are going to be made redundant from the NHS England, maybe some of those can be taken in by the Home Office so they could actually start processing those many immigration claims. The response from refugee advocacy groups has been emphatic. Care for Calais, which brought the legal action, has called for the immediate closure of Wethersfield, arguing that the government has a moral duty to act. And this echoes the outcry over the Bibi Stockholm barge, another ill-conceived asylum accommodation project that had to be evacuated because of Legionella bacteria. If nothing else, these repeated failures highlight the government when Suella Braverman was the Home Office minister, the government's consistent prioritisation of headline-grabbing policies over legally sound and ethically defensible solutions. This is about the power of the Home Office, as much as it is about the failure of Suella Braverman and the previous Conservative government. This judgment also speaks to a broader reality. Immigration policy in the UK is becoming increasingly aggressive and performative, and we need to think of another way forward. There are many countries across Europe that simply allow refugees and immigrants to work and to contribute to the society that they want to belong to. And maybe we should think about allowing that, giving people the equivalent of a pink card or whatever bureaucratic device is needed to give people the opportunity to seek work, to pay into the tax fund, and therefore to fund, if necessary, their own accommodation. Braverman, more than most, relished the political theatre of the immigration debate, casting herself as the champion of the people against the so-called liberal establishment. Yet when it comes to policy execution, the results have been abysmal. The legal defeats, the unworkable schemes, the financial costs, all illustrate the chasm between the rhetoric and the reality of Suella Braverman. Ultimately, this case is not merely a technical failure in Home Office procedure. It's a moral indictment of a policy approach that treats asylum seekers not as individuals with rights but as problems to be contained, and that hasn't changed with the change of government. The Labour government continues on the same trajectory. It's also a political indictment of an administration, past and present, that has placed ideology above legal duty and deterrence above dignity. And perhaps Braverman will find solace in debating these points at another Oxford Union event, or maybe she can go to the Cambridge Union. But as the High Court has now made clear, the real debate, the one that matters, is happening in courtrooms and in government offices, where legality and practicality outweigh the empty slogans of an empty mind.